the person even interrupted Angela Corey with that, why'd you overcharge? Well, the jury didn't think so. That's the kind of fire that was coming at that prosecution team.
Tanya Miller, is it a valid point or not? Could we have had a different outcome had the charges been different? For example, maybe manslaughter as a top charge and a lesser included being something beneath that.
You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that we would have had a different outcome. Look, would we have had a different outcome if the jury were composed of 6 African-American mothers? I mean, you know, I think that some of this is just a little bit speculative. At the end of the day, this jury heard the evidence, they heard George Zimmerman's version, and they believed it. They believed it notwithstanding all the lies that the prosecutor pointed out. And, you know, I think that that is really what is shaking so many people who are just really shocked by this verdict. I had a friend who sent me a message that said, you know, what is wrong with our system when a young black child can be convicted of his own murder? You know, I, unlike Jason, do still believe in this system. I don't think that we should give up on it. I think that this really makes the case for diversity on juries, diversity in prosecutors' offices, diversity in law enforcement, and people need to be aware of the laws that are on the books and how they might apply to them, and then take action.
I gotta say,
I have to ask a follow-up question on that, and maybe I'll throw it to Jason. Why was this jury the way it was? I mean, the prosecution, they have, there's a whole process for selecting an impartial jury that is a representation of one's peers. Why did it turn out like this with 6 women and 5 non-Hispanic whites and 4 of them with a connection to weapons, either a family member who has weapons and one used to have a concealed weapons permit?
Well, first I'm going to say I haven't lost faith in the system. I've just been very realistic about how our legal system generally operates with the poor and with African Americans and Latinos. It wasn't changed by anything that happened in the ruling. But here's what's interesting. If you really think about the demographics of this jury, what do you have to find for a jury in a case like this? You have to find people who are disinterested or unaware of a highly racialized, nationally important case in a town of only about 50,000 people. You were going to have a hard time finding black people in Sanford who hadn't heard of this case. So I think they were really hamstrung by the kind of sort of the environment, the universe in which they could even pick their jury. A change of venue might have actually been a good suggestion for the prosecution initially, but I think that's part of why they got the jury. You probably weren't going to find a collection of 6 African-American women in this town of Sanford who weren't very much already informed about this case.
Well, that's not actually the standard. I mean, the jurors don't have to approach a case or come to a case not knowing anything about it. The question is, can you find jurors who are willing to be impartial judges of the evidence? You can't tell me that there aren't African Americans who could have been impartial judges of the evidence, just like there are white Americans. So sometimes that's just the luck of the draw, and I'm not blaming anybody for the makeup of this jury, but I think that it does say something about how different people in our society view this case and view these facts. And had there been some alternative perspectives on that jury, perhaps things would have been different.
Ashley Merchant, how much of this case was won or lost with jury selection?
Well, I think we need to focus on how a jury is selected. You don't pick who you want, you deselect.
Right.
And so it's folks that couldn't be fair and impartial, that couldn't have been good jurors, that were actually deselected for the jury, and then you end up with the 6 that you're left with. And I also think that the focus in a trial, and I think we keep forgetting this, the focus in a trial is on whether or not the state has proven that George Zimmerman is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not whether or not Trayvon Martin was murdered. It's not whether or not that was right or wrong. It's none of those. It's not whether or not the loss of a child is horrible and what happened is horrible. The focus is on whether or not the state proved the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. And so we have to keep remembering that that's what the trial is about, and that's what criminal trials and criminal justice is about.
Right, and if I were a defense attorney, I would have worked very hard to make sure that there were no black mothers on the jury. I mean, that's what, I mean, again, it's a mutual process. They're both arguing. There were two people on the jury that the state wanted off. I'm sure there were people on the jury that the defense wanted off.
Right. Well, and it's whenever I have a defendant, that if I had a defendant that was a black defendant, the state is usually the one that's working very hard to keep the jury focused a certain way.